you, Stefan. So let's proceed with the verification and validation methodology. This is part of the FITMAN methodology offerings rather than the pure software aspects that we saw earlier on. Before diving into more details of what exactly we have provided in the verification and validation methodology and how you can utilize it, I would like to take a step back and start from what is actually verification and what is validation. You can see in the table here what is the official IEEE definition. I'm not going to read it right now. What I want us to have in mind is during the verification activities, the question we have in the back of our mind is if we are building the product right, if it is built according to the requirements and the design specifications. Whereas for the validation, the question we have to answer is whether we are building the right product, if the product actually meets the end user's needs, if the specifications were correct in the first place, and if the product actually fulfills the intended use when it is utilized in the intended environment. The methodology we have defined, the purpose it had was to provide an all-inclusive framework for verification, validation, and eventually evaluation of a software product from its conception to the final release and implementation in real-life factory settings. It is a methodology, as you will notice later on, that is not restricted to FITMAN. It can be applied to any software project in which verification and validation activities are provided, should be conducted, and it is up, the way we have defined it, it is up to its software team to define which aspects, which techniques they want to adopt and to what extent. What we try to do in this specific methodology is four main aspects in which we try to innovate. First of all, we try to bring together both the agile and waterfall philosophies for verification, to bring them together and define a common verification and validation methodology. What we noticed in the state-of-the-art analysis we conducted before this, the proposed methodology we elaborated, was that we had the V model for the waterfall software engineering V&V activities, and we had different, not so much accepted V&V-like frameworks in case of agile development. The methodology we developed tries to bring them both together. In the past, the verification and validation activities were mainly restricted within one company, within a specific team that was developing the product. Right now, the tendency is to infuse a more crowd assessment mentality in the V&V activities, in the software development in general. We need to get as soon as possible the opinion of the customers, the opinion of the alpha, beta users in order to incorporate feedback as early as possible. We try to include both business and technical perspectives. We want to achieve, to ensure that the end product we are developing meets the business needs, but also has met the goals, the technical specifications that have been defined. And finally, we are providing some more practical guidelines on how to adopt this method. The overview I am providing is just, let's say, a glimpse at the top of the iceberg. This V&V method has taken a lot of effort not only during its conception but during its implementation in each and every FITMAN trial and a specific enabler. So there is a lot of work behind what I'm going to present you, and if you want more details, please contact us in order to give you more information on how to retrieve specific results that are of interest to you. The overview of the overall methodology, you can see a figure that I'm sure you cannot read right now very well. I just want you to give you the glimpse of the methodology from a distance. What it includes is a product-specific perspective that you can see on the bottom of the slide. This relates to the verification and validation activities for specific products. In the terminology we are utilizing in the figure program, it is about the specific enablers and the generic enablers, this perspective. Then on the top you can see what we call the trial perspective. Specific trials, specific implementations of trial solutions in various domains, in various manufacturing domains, had also to perform the validation mainly activities in order to ensure that the result we were developing, combining generic enablers, specific enablers, and trial-specific components, met the intended use. In the middle, what you can see is not relevant to the verification and validation methodology, the platform perspective from a figure, a FITMAN perspective. It is related to how the specific enablers, generic enablers, and the trial-specific components come together under a common reference architecture. We will dive in the next slides into more detail what each step in the product-specific and the trial-specific perspective are. From this slide, what I want you to remember is that each step does not involve only the development team, only the trial owner or the trial team in general. We have identified a number of roles that could be, a number of stakeholders that could be involved in every step of our methodology, of our 7-step methodology. 7 steps and 2 phases, this is what I want us to remember as a first step as we see the V&V methodology. The trial-specific perspective, or what we could say the more business, the more manufacturer perspective. We have defined 2 steps. The first step concerns the trial solution validation. This step guarantees that the overall trial solution satisfies intended use and user needs. The validation is performed mainly from a technical and a functional viewpoint. And in this case, the technique that is proposed, that is recommended from our side to be adopted, is user acceptance testing. If you go back to our results, there are many more techniques that could be alternatively adopted in this step as well. The second step is the business validation. In this step, the aim is to assess whether the overall trial solution offers sufficient added value, if it has a clear benefit, if it helps them to operate more efficiently in terms of cost, in terms of time, in terms of quality than before, or to support them to do things, to do operations that they couldn't do before. In this step, our recommended technique is to adopt the simplified eco-gray methodology that includes the definition of specific objectives and ends up with the definition of specific business performance indicators. During FITMAN, in the trial solution validation step, we recommend 5 technical indicators to be assessed by any client, any trial that has adopted a specific solution, and the specific trial, the specific organization that has adopted the specific enabler, the software solution in general, also defines specific business business performance, indicators that try to assess what is the business benefit that is derived by each organization. If we move forward with the product-specific perspective, in which we have 5 steps. The first one concerns the code verification. The code verifications ensures that the intended functionality, correctness, reliability, and robustness of code. White box testing, unit testing can be adopted during this step that involves mainly the development teams. In the model verification, we try to align the design, the requirements, the design and the code, that the end product, the mock-ups, are easily understandable by the end users, for example. In the backlog verification, we try to determine whether the requirements that have been set have been met after the end of each sprint. If we are talking about the agile software engineering methodology that has been adopted by the development team. If this is not the case and we don't have agile cycle sprints every week or every month, then we don't have a specific, these 3 steps are not, let's say, repeated during each sprint, but they are conducted once during each release. The code verification, model verification steps, and the backlog verification is actually merged with the release verification step that determines whether the requirements of the product release are eventually met. And in this case, we recommend alpha testing or regression testing as techniques that can verify it. The last step for the product-specific perspective is the product validation that examines whether the product satisfies the intended use as per se, meaning that the specific enabler, if it offers sufficient added value for anybody who intends to utilize this specific enabler, this product. User acceptance testing is, in this case, the recommended technique. What I would like to point out at this point is that in FITMAN, it was not the specific enablers, the generic enablers were not developed from scratch. And for this reason, the 3 first steps, the code verification, model verification, and backlog verification, were not applied in the same way and to the same level of detail as it happened with the last 2 steps, that is the release verification and the product validation. These 2 steps actually could be applied by anybody who intends to utilize a generic enabler or a specific enabler in specific contexts. We have conducted a number of tests, we have documented them, we have launched developer acceptance survey, we have defined specific technical indicators in order to see whether the specific enablers and the generic enablers are according to the requirements. With regard to the assessment of the business impact, I am aware of the time, so I have to go a little bit more quickly in the next slides. For the business impact, the trial owners, the organizations that deploy a specific solution are responsible to assess it through specific business performance indicators that need to be easily to understand, easily to measure, quantifiable, and representative of the objective that they measure. And it is important for each indicator to report both the as-is value, what is the current value, where we want to go, what is the targeted value, and what is the actual value we achieved when we deployed the solution, the to-be value. The technical indicators that were assessed for the specific enablers were initially 3, and in the next slide I'm going to show you some additional ones. They are related to the openness of the specific enabler, whether it has an open source implementation, open specifications, etc. The interoperability maturity, how easy it is to utilize and integrate it in with other systems, if it offers, for example, an API to expose part or all its functionalities. The ease of application, how easy it was to apply, to adopt it in specific environments, if it needed extra effort and how much that was. From a trial perspective, the 5 indicators were fulfillment of requirements, if the solution that was adopted at trial level, at organization level, met the requirements, if it was easy to learn its functionalities, to understand how to use it, if it was attractive, and if it was efficient in terms of time and resources needed. The additional technical requirements I mentioned that are related to the specific enablers are correctness, if the specific enabler, if the software is free from defect, the efficiency, if it provided the appropriate performance, reliability, if it met specific performance requirements, and sustainability, how easy it has been to maintain the software. These technical indicators that I mentioned have been utilized in different steps of the V&V methodology and have been assessed not by the development teams, obviously, but by the developers and the trials that utilized specific software. For the trial solution, what we tried was not just to involve the people that were behind each solution, the trial owners, but also people within the organizations from other departments, from other units in the organization, in order to get a broader understanding of how what kind of added value the solution we deployed in FITMAN provided to the overall organization. Some other ways to collect feedback during the V&V activities were the trial journals. The trial journals allowed us to gather unstructured information for the experience of each trial, both from a technical and a business perspective. And now what I'm showing you is what was the overall verification and validation methodology, how it was applied in practice in FITMAN. We defined business indicators for the trials defined with the help of the eco-gray methodology. We assessed a number of technical indicators, both for the specific enablers and for the overall trial solution. We gathered unstructured information. We conducted specific verification tests for the 5 steps we saw from a product perspective for all the specific enablers that we developed in FITMAN, and we also developed some questionnaires to be answered by all developers that utilize our specific enablers and provides us with feedback. This is an example of the forms we utilized for the specific enablers in order to capture what are the exact methods that were adopted in each step of the product specific, in each of the 5 steps of the product specific perspective of the PMP methodology. For the step 4, the release verification, we had provide each developer of the specific enabler provided documentation of the tests that were conducted in detail in order to ensure that the specific enablers were of the expected quality before they release. And for the product validation, the step P5 for the specific enablers, we have also launched specific surveys that you will find in the catalog, the links, in order to provide us with feedback for each specific enabler in separate. Very briefly, the experience in FITMAN was collected by all people, by all stakeholders that were involved. The method, although sometimes it was difficult to understand, it was sufficient. The people who utilized it needed training, support, and online tool in order to conduct the necessary activities. It was worth the effort, and we were all, let's say, recommending to the trials and to the specific enablers teams that the verification and validation activities need to be an ongoing and iterative process that is documented properly, that gathers the necessary data at the right time, that combines both business and technical perspectives, and that tries to infuse, to the extent that it is possible, crowd validation concepts in the activities. And of course, to adopt at least one recommended technique in each case.